Welcome back to Wild Contemplations with Cori and Kristin. I am Kristin. I am a 1-3 emotional projector, and Cori here and I are going through this contemplation around the wheel where we're talking about um, the gene keys as they're illuminated by the sun and their programming partner in the earth. And we're weaving in aspects of human design, astrology, gene keys, and today we'll get into channels, I think, too. So, um, Cori, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Kristen. Hello, everyone. I am Cori. I'm a 4-6 sacral manifesting generator, and I'm really happy to be here with you each week on this fun adventure together. We usually check in after we take a few breaths together and just kind of touch on the keys that we contemplated last week, which was the sun in two and the earth in one. And then this week, we will be contemplating the sun in 23, the earth in 43. And as Kristen mentioned, they create a channel between the ajna and the throat. So I'm really excited for today. And I thought we would just take a few minutes to drop in here together at the beginning. We usually just take 3 breaths. So if it feels good to close your eyes or soften your gaze, maybe bring a hand to the belly or the heart and just take those breaths. All right. Well, I feel like you have maybe some things to share with me because we didn't talk as much before the call. But I'll just, for a refresher, share the frequency bands of the two and the one. So the two, we had dislocation, orientation, and unity. And the one, we had entropy, freshness, and beauty. And they both live in the G or identity center.
Mm. Yeah, so this is how I'm feeling. I feel like there are a lot of doors around me sort of abruptly closing, and also some new beautiful doors opening. And I have found myself where I feel like I'm in this video game where I'm just in the center and my little like Mario guy is like running and the world around me is just changing um or evolving. That's how I feel it's been going. I have very much been, I guess, focused on building my foundation right now and or like recalibrating to my new foundation or new world, let's say, and just being really mindful of my nervous system and keeping, tuned into how I'm feeling and what my body wants and making space to move energy more right now, especially with, these doors like opening and closing in front of me. Yeah, so that's a little snippet into my week.
Thank you for sharing. So, how is it feeling like as the doors close? Is it like, um, what's it bringing up? I would love to hear if you feel like sharing.
Hmm. Yeah, there's definitely been some, I would say maybe like a little feelings of rejection. Um, but noticing how that quickly turns around. Like once I just reflect on it and I'm like, oh, yeah, like parts of me want, maybe want to confront the situation, um, just to like make the energy clean to me. Because some of these doors that have closed for me have been unexpected and not necessarily direct. It's almost like they've been kind of closed passive aggressively almost. Um, and there's this part of me that wants to like address it or like clean the energy. And also, as soon as I sort of work through those emotions, I'm realizing like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. And that I'm actually good. And that I just redirect my energy then and focus on, something else or what is, sort of illuminating around me already. Um, so yeah, I'm finding a quicker acceptance with it, even if the initial blow is like, oh, that sucks, or that doesn't feel great. I'm finding a quick turnaround with it as soon as I reflect on it for a moment. But the important thing for me, especially being an emotional, I think is just the expression of that. It's not like I'm not hiding it or pushing it down. I'm saying this bothered me out loud, right? Even if it's not to someone. Um, maybe it's in my journal, maybe it's to my partner, maybe it's to chat. I don't know, like, but I'm saying to someone or something that it bothered me. And once I do that, then the energy moves.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that because I think that it does give a clear picture of the two. And I just wondered because I think we talked about it last week, but you have your Chiron here. And so I think it's
Mm,
helpful too to see that it can bring up emotions when those doors start to close and like just how you're working through that and processing that as an emotional. But also, it's so cool to see that there's other doors opening and that you have that awareness of like, okay, I'm just being redirected, you know? It's
mhm,
like, again, with the two, it's really this sense of like, everything is kind of happening and working out just as it's meant to. And there's like, we can never be in the wrong place or like having something go wrong. It's like when those opportunities or doors shut or close or, leave our field, it's just because they're not meant for us anymore. And it's just life's way of showing us, like, oh, look, there's a door over here. You wouldn't have noticed that other door if you were over in that door, you know? So like
mhm,
it does kind of take away too, I think some of the emotional charge of like again with Chiron, I think there is going to be the charge because it does really kind of highlight some of the wounding from
mhm,
earlier in our life's experience. But at the same time, it shows you that you like can walk through that and process that in so many beautiful ways and come out on the other side with like, oh, well, I have all of these things that are opening up, and like you said, the world is changing around me. Like it's like you're moving through this game and you get to have fun with it and just know that like the other stuff is a level that you already passed. That's kind of how I see it.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating to see how much moves in a week, especially when you feel like, is anything really happening around me right now? I find myself in those spaces a lot where I think I'm not moving fast enough. And then as soon as I start talking about it, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on around me.
Yeah, so much
Um,
like change. And again, that's the one where the earth is. It's like this freshness, it's this creativity that's wanting to move and try new things and work on new projects and walk through new doors. And so I just really appreciate you sharing your experience with us because I think it's a beautiful example of the energy like in action. Um, and yeah, I am been really enjoying these days since we met last and like our contemplation of these keys, they're part of my nodal axis. And so I have my north node where the sun is right now and my south node where the earth is. And I just feel like I'm settling into this deeper trust in life's unfolding and in the sort of mystery of it all. And again, trusting that like the things that come up that are feeling not, like, oh, I wish that would have worked out, or I thought that was going to happen. It's like, oh, actually, that wasn't meant to happen. And like, I'm just really, I think, moving at a slower pace, like, like more, like it feels like each of my feet are just like connected to the earth as I'm like walking through everything. Um, and it's felt really, uh, beautiful and um, I'm excited. I'm getting ready to travel, and this is the kind of energy that I always like to feel when I travel, which is just like this deep trust in everything that's going to unfold, because there are so many kind of things that are up in the air. And um, again, we can plan, I've been through different ways of traveling where I plan a bit more, but over the last couple of years, I've really kind of let life guide me more. And so I'm really excited to like work with this new level of trust that I feel like is opening up inside me.
Mm. I think this is the first week, just based on that share between you and I, the first week that I've seen how the astrology sort of colors our experiences. So that's pretty cool.
That's super cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think we'll just find more and more. Just there will be little moments where we're like, oh, okay, I see it very clearly. Um, and yeah, it's something that I've noticed like now that I've been doing it. Um, I've gone around the wheel a few times in this practice of mine. It's like yeah, I can already like tune into and feel it and be like, oh, wow, okay, that is making so much sense why that's happening. Sometimes there are moments of forgetting. And like when I first started this practice, I would like, something would be going on and I would be like, really struggling with it. And then I would listen to like the contemplation of the gene key and I'd be like, oh, duh. Like, why didn't I do that sooner? So I think it's cool to just yeah, be on this adventure together um and watch it unfold like in our lives, not through any sort of like trying to make it, but just observing it happening. It's pretty cool stuff. So maybe we will start contemplating the sun in 23 and the earth in 43, unless you had anything else you wanted to share before.
No, I'm good.
All right.
Let's contemplate.
All right, cool. I heard it a bit in what you were even just sharing too, um, about like really sort of building the foundation and um, you know, checking in with yourself and getting clear on like how do I want things to feel? How do I want things to look? Because the 23 has the frequency bands of complexity, simplicity, and quintessence. In human design, it's the gate of assimilation and it lives in the throat center and reaches towards the ajna. And in the I Ching, it translates to splitting apart. And then the earth, its programming partner, the 43, has frequency bands of deafness, insight, and epiphany. And this lives in the ajna and reaches towards the throat, so they create that channel. In human design is called the channel of structuring, or sometimes like genius to freak. It's a design of the individual. So it's just like our keys last week, it's in the individual knowing circuit. And so it's very unique to the vessel and individual that energy is like moving through and their sort of interpretation of it. So in human design, this is the gate of insight. If I don't know if I mentioned that. And then in the I Ching, it translates to breakthrough. And we both have some placements here. I have my design Earth in 23, and I have my Saturn in 43, my natal Saturn. And you have your design Uranus in 43. So I feel like we'll have quite a bit to talk about today with this. One of the things that's really just standing out to begin with, again, is this idea of simplicity and like coming to center and getting clear, listening, right? Like the 43 is very connected to the inner ear. So like listening and getting clear on like what is it that we're wanting to create? What is the life that we are designing for ourselves? And like kind of running through the actions that we take through that lens. This is something that Richard really talks about in this contemplation of the 23. It's like it feels like being very intentional about everything that you do and the life that you're living. So you're not just like going through the motions or just like kind of doing the things you think you're supposed to do. Again, it's a very individual circuitry, so it's designed to be unique to you. What do you want? How do you want to again, if the 23 lives in the throat, how do you want to bring your visions and ideas and concepts and put them into form and put them into the life that you're living? Um, there's lots more I can say about it, but I'll stop there and we'll check in.
Yeah, it's interesting because it reminds me, even though you were speaking a lot to the 23, with the frequency bands in the 43, what it reminds me of is just how often I've learned the same thing over and over again without hearing it. And then at some point it lands and it just lands in the body so differently. It's kind of like the journey of integration, right? It's like we know these things over and over again, but when we actually embody them, it just lands in our system so differently, right? It's like when um at one point I think I talked about the 51% in one of our episodes where it's like you're sort of challenged by the journey, challenged by the journey, challenged by the journey, but once you go that new route 51% of the time, you feel some sense of relief, right? Another example of it is early on when I hired my first coach, it was a lot of emotional healing. And she used to ask me, can you love the part of you who, is angry at your mother for not being there or whatever it was, that we were working on healing. And or the part or can you love the part of you that is judgmental of your best friend or like whatever it is, right? And I was always like, no, I can't love that part of me. Like I don't want to feel that energy. I feel bad about being judgmental. I feel bad about, being angry. I don't want to hold this anger anymore. I just want, at the time it was like I want my mother to change. And eventually over time, like you start to hold space for love. And right when at a time when you can't seem to, and you just invite a little bit more of it in at a time, right? When you get to that like 51% shit, all of a sudden I can feel the love. I can actually feel it here. Now you can hold this polarity. It's it's those moments when you feel like I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't, and then all of a sudden you can. That's what that feels like to me. And you were talking about, with the 23, like the lens, the lenses that we're looking through and being very intentional. And to me, that's what that feels like too, right? Where I think in another episode, we were talking about like consumption and overconsumption, addiction, we were talking about, right? And this is very relevant for me as a one line. I'm always learning. But if I'm not doing it with intention and I'm just consuming, over consuming and not actually applying the things, then it becomes this deafness for me. And this is why I think when we learn things, we've listened, we've heard the same thing over and over again. And at some point, some teacher says it, and you're like, oh, I get it. Because that deafness isn't in your frequency now. Like now you're actually open to the insight, right? Or the divine timing of it, the moment that it lands, right? They say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. But I think this is really relevant right now, especially in the world that we live in, where there is a lot of overconsumption and um, scrolling and all the things.
I love this. I'm trying to feel into which of the many threads I want to like go with first. Um, but I think I want to talk about this deafness too, um, because I see it in a lot of different ways that I think is kind of cool to explore a little bit. So, um, obviously it can present as so many ways. And one of the things that I think is really cool is with the deafness, this is one of the keys where I really am able to see this happens in all of them, but sometimes it's a little harder to like conceptualize when we hear some of the words. But with these words, I'm able to see how the shadow is also like at the city, when we open up into that full spectrum and we experience it at like both ends. And so, like at the one end, when again, we're very in our head, we're making things more complicated than we need to. Like there's this fear around not knowing enough. So we're like filling our our mind with things. We're filling our just days with extra stuff to like make us feel some sort of way. And it does block us from really like hearing what's going on within ourselves, because it's really focused outwardly and it's focused like on the mind. This 43 lives in the ajna. So it can it can go places. Um, and it fears sort of being rejected. It fears standing out and not being, seen and recognized as someone that's wanting, that's wanted in the tribe. And it fears not knowing enough, not having um, the words to put to things and being misunderstood and all of those things. But it's because it when it's at this level of deafness where it's not knowing itself, then it can't really transmit that information properly because it's meant to be very individualized information. But if we're running it through the filter of the outside world of all of this stuff that we're taking in, then it gets distorted. But then we can see at the other end of the spectrum, when we are in our authentic truth, that the level of deafness that we have to the outside of telling us what to do or how we should be or even what they think of us or anything like that, we don't take that in, and so we are able to really like stay in our lane, stay in our truth, share that in that unique expressive way. So I think it's cool to see it like at both sides there. And then two, I think sometimes of, and especially when you're sharing, of like projected energy. So the projector, also projected channels. Like obviously this is a projected channel and it's all about timing. So like right timing is essential to this. And again, we if we can listen and kind of center ourselves and move through life as simply as possible, we're able to like really click into the timing with much more ease. Um, if we are sharing these things before the timing is correct, so without the invitation of sorts, energetically speaking, mechanically speaking, then it falls on deaf ears, right? Like I'm sure you can speak to this um, really well in that, yeah, people just won't be open to it in this way that they can hear it. But a cool thing is that I was just kind of talking about in a session before is again, these things, they can still stay in the field. You know, they've been planted there and they can drop in. And so I'm sure you've probably actually also noticed as a projector that a lot of times you'll like say things to people or share these insights the way that you know, see things from this bird's eye view. And then like a little while later, you know, however long, maybe weeks, months, years, days, they'll all of a sudden like come up with this idea and you'll be like, I've been saying that to you for like a super long time. But it's just it finally like clicks into place like you were sharing. And so I think that's what was mainly coming up. Uh yeah, the one thing that I wanted to touch on to start.
Hmm. Story of my life.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for how long now? And now you heard it from someone else? What? Cue bitterness. Um, yeah, it was interesting when you were talking about some of the fears. And I'm curious, with mine having placement in Uranus, because I have like feelings, fear of being misunderstood and not knowing enough are definitely in my, have been a part of my journey for sure. Um, I think the not knowing enough one, honestly, both of them probably have shifted a lot for me at this point in my journey, but I remember very vividly, just fearing that I didn't know enough, so I wouldn't speak up all the time. It's where a lot of my um I have an undefined throat, and it's where a lot of that got clogged for me because I just held it. Um for fear of being misunderstood, or that I didn't actually know all the facts or details, or like, yeah, specifics that maybe I thought were expected to be able to voice an opinion about something. But I could very vivid or deeply feel the energy of it. So that's another aspect of it, actually, in that, the not knowing enough, also trusting the energetics of it, trusting that my knowing is on the energetic side of it, maybe not the book knowledge part of it, but more in the energetic side. And then from there, feeling not misunder or feeling misunderstood. I was working when I was working in corporate towards the end of my career. I remember talking to uh, the president of the company that I worked for, and I was telling him how, there was a people issue. Like the people were misaligned with the company, and there were a lot of people unhappy at the company. And they were a group of engineers. So naturally, they wanted all the data behind that. And I couldn't give them that. Um, right? Because I want to obviously keep people's confidentiality, but we didn't have like satisfaction surveys per se that would judge happiness in the company. And I remember I sent the president this TED talk that was about, it was called Something Big Data. And the TED talk was basically about how this woman, I believe it was a woman, was hired by Nokia to find out the next big thing in cell phones. And so she went to all these coffee shops and she's like observing people and all of that. And she comes back and says the next big thing is people are going to want like a computer in their hands. They're going to want to have this like mini access to this computer in their hands. essentially a smartphone, like what became the smartphone. And Nokia said that's bullshit. Like we don't have all the data tells us something different. We're not going to do that. We're not going to listen to that. And Nokia eventually went out of business. And so it was this talk around how like what do we consider real data, right? Like this is also like if this brings up for me now like the science and the woo, right? Where so many people are like fuck the woo, I don't understand the woo. I need all the scientific facts and data around it. But the world is so much more expansive than that. Um, so yeah, there's a little riff on that for you.
I love it. I can feel Uranus involved. Actually, whenever I've thought of this 43, because I've done a bit of contemplation with it since my Saturn is there. And whenever I've thought of it, I've always kind of gotten the vibe of Uranus, you know? It feels like this, again, sudden like breakthrough, insight, something just all of a sudden you hear something so clearly that before you couldn't, or, you know, it's just this, it very much feels like the archetype of Uranus in this like yeah, like different way. Again, the 43 is in this unique way of channeling. And so it's also like it can't really be learned in books, you know? Of course, you can, you know, receive information and then filter it in your own way. But this, to me, this whole channel is like more about, you know, really receiving inspiration and then like kind of channeling it through, and it because of the connection with the throat a lot of times too, it like doesn't necessarily come through until we start talking. Like it's like when we start talking, then it's almost like it's channeling through and out. And there again, there's just a lot of wisdom there and insight, but it's a different way of doing things. Again, if you just think of like a breakthrough in like evolution or something like that, right? Like those sort of breakthroughs that kind of got us here. They're not the ones that are like, "Oh, we did all the we did all the math and we have all the data and this is what's going to happen now." It's like all of a sudden just like, you know, and again, on an evolutionary timeline, it's maybe not all of a sudden, but it seems like all of a sudden we just start doing something totally different out of left field, you know? But it's because it comes through a mutative energy of the individual that's not caught up in group think, right? Because the group think is going to keep us in doing things the same way we've been doing them. It's like connected to these patterns, and we're just going to kind of keep watching these play out. But all of a sudden, the individual receives this, and they see it through their unique lens, and something shifts. And actually, in my contemplations about this, what's really stood out with the 43 is like kind of almost coming to a place of like not knowing, like being okay with not knowing it all. Like knowing that there's no way we could know it all. And when we try to know it all, we don't leave room for
Mhm.
the real like insight and genius to move through us. Um, And it's like, yeah, I can see very clearly in my own experience with this that there is a lot of fear around that. Because again, like I've shared in the earlier episodes of like this podcast, even like coming on here and just sitting down and like seeing what happens, like that's a bit scary. But I can feel the power of it when it just, we start talking, right? Like it leads to this and that and there. And it, I think it allows so much more wisdom to really drop through than if we were like, all right, today we're going to talk about this, and these are like the bullet points, you know? But it is a bit out there. And again, it can experience if like I know in my experience, if I share things with people and they aren't ready, there's not an opening there, then I will be shut out. I will be like, they'll be like, what are you talking about?
Mhm.
You know? And that has been a bit of a pain point for me to work through. But now I'm realizing like that is just showing me again, kind of going back to the beginning and like the open doors and the closed doors. Like it's just showing me where my energy is like being guided. It's not something to take personally. Although again, because this is like an individual circuitry, it can feel very personal because it's like coming from your unique
Mhm.
perspective of things and way of, yeah, conceptualizing. But okay, I'll stop there.
Hmm. I feel like this is a real invitation for us to consider the responsibility that we have when we see different perspective to be planting those seeds out there because, as you were saying, like people will perpetuate the same patterns over and over and over again until they don't. And it's in those planting of seeds often that like will spark something, right? Whether that's through a conversation, whether it's like a book, whatever it is that sparks that, sort of initiation in someone. But nonetheless, it's a seed. It's something that is planted and sparks and it speaks directly to the soul. The timing has landed, like it's there, it's ready, they're receptive, like it's prime time to receive. And so I think it's really important, despite the, frustration or bitterness that we might feel when, when we are shut out or somebody doesn't want to hear that perspective. It doesn't mean to stop giving that. It is our responsibility to continue to share that because it's the only way that we stop perpetuating patterns that exist. And then on the other end of it too, right? Like we can also plant seeds that perpetuate the patterns that we don't want, and then people don't realize a lot of that as well. But I think this like idea of seed planting and our responsibility and not letting our egos get in the way of this is important, right? Like this viewpoint matters. This viewpoint is going to be an initiator of change, and that's important for our evolution. And then, it spirals into, which we've talked about in past episodes, like how when we don't listen, how these like bigger things start to happen and bigger disasters and bigger like worldwide dilemmas, that really at some point are here again to say, hey, you didn't listen to like the little seeds that we planted. So here you go. Here's a world disaster for you to contemplate now. And now where do you want to go? Where do you choose to go? And it's always this choice, right? Of, where am I? And am I happy with being here? Is this where I want to be? Is this what I've come to accept for the rest of my life? Or do I want to open to a new perspective?
I'm just having so many things come through. I'm like, ooh, where do I go? Um, I love that you share this because I I've really seen just lately, especially like the power that you're speaking to. And I think as we move through these next couple of years, this is going to become more and more essential. And one thing that I would say too, again, because, okay, we have the 43 in the ajna and the 23 in the throat. So it's like the more that we put words to these insights and ideas, the clearer our communication becomes in sharing them too. So it's like, I know for me, a big part of like this process has been okay in my mind I'm like connecting this and connecting that and connecting this. And like in my mind, it feels very, it doesn't feel that complicated. But when I was trying to explain it to people at first, the looks on their faces are like, what is going on right now? Like, that's too much, man. That feels super complicated. But the more that I have put words to it, the more that I have put voice to it, the simpler I've been able to make it. And so I would also just say this for anyone that's like feeling, because I just know that I walk through this a lot. It's like feeling like, how do I talk about this? What do I say? And I know now I've had enough evidence that if I keep putting words to it, even if it's jumbled at first, even if it does seem, complicated or too much, the more that I do that, the more I find my unique voice and I can make it in a way that lands and is like to the point, that like quintessence, right? And it does come a lot too, I think, from slowing down. Again, with the right timing. I think sometimes we can get so excited about something and like, oh, I gotta share this, like, and I gotta talk about it. And again, I would totally encourage talking about it and sharing about it. But from this more like, yeah, like, okay, just sitting with it and thinking about how we want to share it. Like do we want to move at maybe a bit of a slower pace and just yeah, not feel in a rush to share it too is something that's coming through. And then another thing is the 23 is like really connected to our hands and like working with our hands and how that kind of like helps bring like certain neural connections into place and like there's something about like slowing down and tending to like I was just thinking about this earlier. One of my biggest things um has been like I really don't like housework. I don't like cleaning. It's like, gosh, why do I have to do that? Like, but I always find that when I slow down and I do it, that like insights drop through. It's almost like I like I laugh every time that I do it because it's like, I'm wiping something off. When I do it with this sense of like, oh, I'm caring for this space. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to make things in the way that I want them to be. I'm going to clear the clutter, right? Like the 23 is about clearing the clutter. And I'm going to like, yeah, use my hands, move in this sort of like, yeah, slower way. And even maybe like repetitive way of wiping or sweeping or whatever it is. And then there's like just I'm like having all these like, oh, okay, like all these things that I was trying, like sitting with for so long, all of a sudden it just starts like boop, 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 dropping in. So that's coming up too.
Mm. I do not have intuitive downloads when I'm cleaning. I echo the I don't love cleaning part. But I do get them when I drive, and I love driving. And I also get them a lot when I'm learning. Like when
Mhm.
I'm listening to people, it like very much activates. And maybe that's part of again, the projector in me, like just being able to see and recognize something in myself because someone else has expressed it. That's probably another aspect of the whole deafness thing too, of the 43. Um, but so I have the 43, and with you, I would complete that full channel.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about that channel because I also like I have that, those realizations come through as I'm speaking too. And I'm sure you guys have heard me on the pod. I'm like, oh, well, this brings up this now as I'm just saying it out loud. So I think it'd be fun to talk a little bit about that channel now.
Yeah. And we've really been kind of like talking about it all along because it is just like this again. So we have the 43 in the ajna, and it's like these unique conceptualization of um, that inspiration, those ideas that are coming down. And it's, yeah, our own unique way of seeing things, of putting things together. Again, it's just going to be so unique to the individual how they're doing it. And then it's the process is about like oftentimes it's taking sort of like vast concepts. It's taking things that are like, seemingly not connected, and it's like making these different connections. Um, and it's then how do I put this into words that people can understand? So it's like, okay, like in just my example, I synthesize astrology, human design, and the gene keys. How can I share this with people in a way where like I don't have to explain what each of these systems is, um, where I can just like take from the story of it and kind of weave it together. And again, this is like for me come through the practice of actually just doing it, like continuing to do it and put words to it. Um, and it's like it's just this invitation each time to get clearer with it. So it's like it's almost like this idea of like, you know, not using the language that I would use in these systems, or like I also see this in academia. Like this was something that was, you know, a part of a lot of the teaching that I was working with in like communication. It's like, okay, you know, not everyone is an expert in this, or not everyone is like understanding this language, but you have some really cool concepts here. How do you put them into a language that anyone can understand? Again, quintessence, like what are we distilling from it? And how can we share this in a way so it's just really like hitting home? Like it's, we get it. I get exactly what you're talking about. I have no idea what astrology, human design, and the gene keys are, but I know what you're saying. That's kind of the process of that channel altogether. That's,
Mm.
I think, a big part of why it's called the channel of structuring. Again, because it's like finding the way to really like put it, structure it so that it can be transmitted out into the collective. Because again, we want it to get out into the collective. It's coming through that individual mutation. And and so how do we get it from here to here in a way that really reaches out and people can get? And that's again where it comes in with that like a design of the individual and the genius to freak, because it's like, okay, if we're sharing it in a way where we're making it super complicated, or we're not waiting for the right timing, people can be like, this person's lost their mind. What is she talking about? All this woo stuff. You were talking about woo at the beginning, like, but if I wait for the invitation, if I'm sharing it like with you in this podcast, people can tune in and to listen if they are interested in that. Like I saw it a lot with my family, or just like random people that I'd be driving, like my Uber driver or something. I'm trying to like read their chart. They're like, okay, no, we didn't ask you to do this. Um, you know, I can see a big difference then when I'm sharing from this place of like, I want you to get it, versus if I'm sharing from this place of like, again, I see that there's an opening there and somebody's really interested. There's a big difference there too.
Mm. Yeah. I see this in you a lot with the storytelling. And sometimes I'll ask these like very like mechanical questions about how it works and everything. And and you're like, it's not like you don't say this, but you're like, it's not black and white. Like it's not one or the like you're always like, it's really everything. It's everything we've been talking every time. Like, so at some point. I don't know if I'll stop asking those questions. That's either like my one line, my defined head, my left quad. I don't know what that is, but like something there makes me. And Cori would say, it's not any of those things. It's just like,
It's everything.
yeah.
It's all of it. And no, I love that you ask those questions. Um, and, obviously I see the 63, which is where you have your purpose, which is like the gift of inquiry, right? Like you're really here to ask those questions. And it's cool because we can see this now because again, somebody else that you ask this question to, they might get really technical with it, like they might really um, go into the specifics and like this means this and this means that. But part of my purpose is like the equilibrium, the balance. And so I just know that I'm here to like see how it all comes together and that it's like coming from all sides and coming from all places. So it's cool to see like how our uniqueness shines through, and that's going to look different for everybody. And I see that so much in this kind of stuff because, like just because I study astrology, human design, and the gene keys doesn't like I'm looking at certain things, I'm taking what's standing out to me. Somebody else, like you and me, if we both did a human design reading, it would be totally different. And one's not like better or worse than the other, or more advanced or less advanced or anything like that. It's just that we are unique individuals and we're going to be drawn to different things. And that's one of the really cool things about um, I think, like, at least in my opinion, sitting with different practitioners. I think you've shared about this before. Like, just it's really cool to see how different people interpret different things. And it's each time, I mean, I've sat with a lot of different people in the same modalities as me. And each time I'm like, wow, I
Yeah.
didn't even know about that. I didn't think about that. Like, and that's the really cool part about each of us sharing in the unique way, because then it comes together and it creates a more full picture, and it's like, yeah, I think that's a really
Mhm.
cool aspect of each of us sharing our unique individual expression.
Mhm. I want to go back for a moment to, what you were talking about with the Genius to Freak channel and how, like, it's about finding the words that will resonate, essentially and ripple out into who needs to hear. And, something that I was called to do in my travels. I was actually taking a bath one day and I got a download that I needed to channel a class on grounding with the elements. Because my baths, this was in Arizona, my baths were grounding for me. And, one of the neat things about it was that we don't, typically when you hear people speak of grounding, they speak to earth. They speak to getting outside, getting your feet on the ground, like go touch a tree, go sit on the ground, like just it's all like earth root chakra energy. And this class was an invitation to teach grounding through all the elements, like so fire, air, water, and earth. And I channeled the class. So when I sat down preparing for it, I channeled, what wants, and I jotted notes down for myself because it was channeling. I wasn't brave enough to just channel the whole class like on the spot. But I channeled things and I jotted down some notes and then I taught the class. And I did a series of classes like this where I was teaching about different things, right? Expression, purpose, grounding with the elements. I can't remember the other ones I did, but this summer I was invited back to this lavender farm to host a manifestation ritual on the farm. And I decided that I'm going to do this. I'm going to channel on manifestation in this like ritual workshop. And I'm really excited about it because what this feels like to me is, again, this invitation for us to not teach from the mind, to really let that be a channel, to let it, to invite in the energy and speak to it. I've even spoken about journaling being a practice. This is how I journal, and I think I've shared this in the past in terms of like energy clearing. I always recommend, like, when you're journaling, just if you're energy clearing, write down energy clearing in your journal, because if you're journaling about things that upset you throughout the day, then you can perpetuate that energy, right? So that's a way a lot of people journal to kind of clear energy. And I just say be intentional with it. But I do that sometimes when I need to clear energy, but most of the time I do intuitive journaling because, journaling is a practice that we really can be in our subconscious. Um, and it's amazing what can come through when, like when I start channeling, I just write down a couple words and I let it flow from there. Whereas a lot of people, especially when I'm teaching intuition, a lot of people get stuck on that. Well, I only heard the word channel this class. I only heard this phrase and I don't know what that means. What class are they just they get stuck on I only got a word, I only saw a color, I only blah blah blah, right? They get stuck on the one thing instead of just okay, like I'm going to walk into that energy and see what comes out after it. And that's the thing, we never know. We never know what's going to be on the other side. And I have so much faith in this process that I've literally done readings for people where I'll say one thing and then I'll say the exact opposite thing right behind it. Or say something that's conflicting with the first thing, right? But as soon as I just trust it, put it out there, then I start to unravel the energy more and it all comes around and makes sense. But we don't give ourselves time and space to be there because, we're so in our minds about, how do I make this make sense to people? And even in my journey, I think I've also shared that when it comes to dimensions, like I'll just put it out there. I believe there are infinite dimensions. It drives me nuts when people say the fifth, the seventh, the 12th dimension. Like that's how many dimensions there are. And I'm like, there's way more than that. Like there's, but anyways, I always, I used to say, like, how do I access these infinite dimensions and then come into the 3D and teach from those dimensions here without having to drop into this space? Like, what if I don't want to be in the 3D anymore because it feels really limiting and I can be out here where things are limitless. So like, can I just stay here and then teach this, right? And the answer that I got was you don't come back, you teach on the bridge. And that was also really beautiful, right? Where again, we don't have to think about how will this make sense in this reality that I live in. But we get to be those bridges. We get to be those seed planters. Like we get to, I think when we access that energy from such a pure space, our access to it and resonance with it makes it resonant for other people when it comes out of our mouth. And you don't get that if you're trying to think, how can I explain the energy? And I see this a lot with energy healers who struggle. They feel things so intensely and they struggle with how do I put words to this? And that's part of it. If you're going to do readings and read energy, like a big part of it is being able to translate that energy. And the biggest thing, if this is you listening to this, I would say is just lean into what you're getting and let it be open on the other end instead of closing the door and saying, I have to figure out what this means first before I open the next door.
I'm thinking about in part of the contemplation that Richard does, like just the things that you were sharing really remind me of this part that I love that he talks about. And it's like your mind is this like wild, like jungle forest. It's not like this, it's not like this cleanly like organized file room or anything like that. Like think of it as just this wild terrain where like anything is possible. And I think that's what you're really kind of speaking to is like, can I trust that there's so much here for me to explore and to like just be with the uncertainty, like not needing to be right or to know, but just to share what is coming through in terms of channeling, right? Like if you're just opening up and just yeah, like something comes through and you say that, and then something else comes through and you say that, and like you said, they might not line up or they might contradict, but you're just saying what's coming through. You're not trying to get in the way of it. Like, what
Mhm.
does this mean to this person? Or like, I've really thought about that a lot in doing sessions that like honestly, I don't I've gotten to this point where like I'm not sure that it actually matters so much what's being said as like the intention behind what's being said. Like it's almost like this communication of a frequency more than it is like a communication of like this is this and this is this. Like, of course this is how we use words to communicate with one another and share with one another. But uh yeah, I think what's happening is actually more about the quintessence underneath what the words are, like what the distillation of everything that's being shared. Like it's just, yeah, this like essence or feeling or something like that. And then I was just curious as you were sharing, I thought about this earlier when you were talking about your Uranus being there in the 43, but you just went through your Uranus return. And so, your design Uranus is in the key before your natal Uranus. So it's kind of like you would have went through that one first. So I wonder if in the last few years, as this is what's really been coming through, is more of these like channeled classes and things. I feel like this would be. I don't know if I just accidentally said Uranus return, but I meant Uranus opposition. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I meant opposition. The return will happen when we're like in our 80s. So it's opposition. So yeah, I wonder if this opposition um, is when you started to kind of notice that. Because then Uranus would have been in the 23, opposing your
Hmm.
natal design Uranus or your design Uranus in the 43.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. It happened, oh gosh. I stopped traveling in 2025. So it was probably 2023 or 2022. So I would have been like 42, 43 age ranges. So yeah, it was a little scary at first. I also did that was the first time I did like a channeled healing too for like a collective group. Um I put that out there too. That lives on my other podcast. So yeah, it's an interesting, that's definitely for sure an invitation to be willing to be misunderstood or
Mhm.
have, people think I don't know what this is or reject you or whatever, but I just leaned so deeply into that calling and trusting, that it would open something for me. And I think that, this is really powerful when we start to teach in this way. Like I was also honestly, I was just thinking, I'm thinking this is what happens when I talk. Like I have like 16 ideas that I'm trying to put in one sentence, and then I jump around and don't finish sentences. But me being a 1-3, and I believe like really designed to be here to learn and teach what I've learned, I think part of that is this evolution of teaching. And so every time I'm invited to teach something, I do let it evolve. And maybe this is why I love teaching live, and I don't always love like teaching and recording it and then selling that recording, even though there's value in that, I know. And in part, I think that's something I need to get past a little bit because I'm always like, well, I've evolved past that. Like, I'm not going to sell that teaching. But there's so much good wisdom in it. And, because it was really channeled from, when the time, everything was aligned for that to be expressed. So there really is such magic in that. And recently I was invited to a convention and I taught an intro class on human design. And I really sat back when I was creating a presentation, which is not really like my thing to create presentations, but I did it because it was a convention. I really sat back and taught human design from a different way than I've ever taught before. It's like I connected with what's the energy that needs to be felt here and how can I be a part of that expression. So to me, it really is, it does speak to this evolution to teaching. I think that sometimes I get in my head with, being a 1-3 and we're supposed to like share from everything we've learned and our mistakes. And sometimes it's hard for me to see logically like how I got, from corporate Kristin to intuitive Kristin. And how do I explain that to someone? It's hard to explain in words, like from a heady logical space. I think I can pull some aspects out, but it gets harder and harder to teach in that way versus if I'm in the presence of someone's energy, now I can merge my energy with their energy and reflect back what I see from the wisdom. That's the magic. Not let me give you the 25 steps of how I got from where you are to where I am now. Because I don't fucking know what those are.
I love it. And that's more powerful too, because again, that was unique to you, you know? Those steps that you took probably were meant for you, but they're not going to work for somebody else. And I think that's uh I love like in the gene keys, they talk about the six lines and the teachers and they give this example of like a teacher is really here to draw the wisdom out of another, like to basically connect them with their own wisdom. And that's what I feel like you're kind of sharing there is like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this is what you should do and this is what I did and this is what works and all of those things. It's like I'm going to feel into what's present for you and again merge like my experience with that and the energetics of it and then I'm going to share something that's like applicable to what's happening in your field and like kind of just bringing that to the surface and reflecting that back so that you see it in this way that maybe you haven't before, or you hear it in this way that you haven't before, which I think is like the way to do it.
Hmm. No, that was a moment for me. I've had a couple of like honestly epiphany moments just in this podcast alone,
Yeah.
in my reflection and being in this space with you. So, I mean, that's one of them, and that just, yeah, being in someone else's space and resonating together, that's the wisdom, and it is not something that you can explain or put into a system, even though projectors are the system masters. Like, that's not it for me. Um, so yeah, it just got really fucking dark here. So
Is
I
it like
think
about to storm?
I don't know, but like, man, it is raining, but man, it got like my camera's super dark. So I think this is probably a good
Time
space
to
to wrap up,
close.
anyways.
Yeah, perfect.
So, how are you feeling? Anything else coming through you want to share?
I'm feeling really complete. This has been fun. And I feel the energy of them alive in everything that we're talking about. So I think, yeah, I'm good with it.
Mm. Well, I am complete too. So thank you all for being here. And if you have something to share, like please let us hear your reflections. We want to hear from you, how you're experiencing these energies. And if you love this episode, please share it with somebody who you think would be intrigued or inspired by a conversation like this. It helps us plant more seeds in the world. So thanks for being here. We'll see you next week where I'll be stateside and Corey will be in Italy. So it's going to be a whole other vibe next week. So we'll see you then.